Neeshargo Shabnam Kamali. Neeshargo Kamali, born in Toronto on June 17, 1997. He is the son of renowned author Saad Kamali. Neeshargo is a student of University of Toronto, Department of Life Science. He lives in Toronto, Canada. Buddhism and psychology. There has been a growing discourse between Buddhism and Western psychology. They both share a pursuit to understand the mind, and to alleviate human suffering. Scientists are working to see what can be taken from the wisdom tradition, and be incorporated into their therapies. While they both have benefits in their respective domains, the success of their integrations are debatable, with criticisms from both sides. These problems may stem from the formulation and execution of any collaborative therapy. The principles being used, like right mindfulness, must be extracted from its religious context, and modified for a secular society. But there is contention from the side of the Buddhists, that the principles' application outside of its holistic and ethical framework poses dangers. Montero, Muston and Compson, 2015. Then there is the actual execution of the therapy. As of yet there are no regulatory bodies that set standards for instructors of mindfulness-based interventions, putting the competency and credibility of their therapies into question. Shonin, Gordon and Griffiths, 2014. Most importantly, while Buddhist-based therapies show growing promise, there is still a lack conclusive evidence of its full reach and efficacy. Shonin, Gordon and Griffiths, 2014. The ultimate goal of this collaborative research is to create a meaningful integration of these two frameworks that epitomizes both, while optimizing between their compatibility, application, execution, and therapeutic reach. Central to the formulation this therapy will be how it treats the patient, and thereby the self. Indeed, the different understanding of the self-base that Buddhism and psychology hold ultimately shape their approach to the mind and suffering. Both the Western and Eastern notions of self provide evidence for an effective therapy, Wallace 2003, yet each lack what the other is good at. The goal of this paper is to attempt a synthesis of these two theories of self that will ultimately emerge in an effective therapy for suffering. The Buddhist idea of self is nestled within a larger theory about the world, called the Four Noble Truths. They are one of the foundational teachings in Buddhism. The doctrine is laid as a progression of revelations, that there is suffering in human life, that there is a cause, that there is an end to suffering, and that the means to that end is the Eightfold Path. This is laid upon three claims about the nature of experience, that it is impermanent, empty of essence, and lacking in inherent satisfaction. The Noble Truths can be structured in a more chronological order that better highlights its progression in goals. There is a misunderstanding of impermanence and emptiness, which causes the five aggregates of the self to crave Noble Truth 2. This leads to there being suffering, or dukkha in the world, Noble Truth 1. There is an approach that rehabilitates the various areas of function of a person, in order to ameliorate that misunderstanding, Noble Truth 4, until the person reaches a point where their suffering ends, Noble Truth 3. The goal of this model is to guide a person to transcend their suffering, by fixing their fundamental distortions of reality. The root of these distortions begin with a misunderstanding of impermanence. The idea of impermanence is from the observation that all things are subject to change. Because things are always changing, they cannot be said to have an essence, leading to the second idea of emptiness. This implies to the self being empty, as the notion of a concrete and stable self cannot exist if it is always in flux. Instead, it is divided into what is called the five aggregates that breaks this process of change into the body, feelings, sensations, volitions, and consciousness of a person. To cling to the belief that any one of these aggregates are permanent/essential, is the basis of dukkha, i.e. suffering. This misunderstanding becomes pervasive in the ways people treat themselves and others. Thus the misunderstanding of the self can be said to be at the heart of the problem, and the start of a solution. Buddhism treats the self as a fluid entity that is not separate from the world, but a dynamic part of it. Its holistic understanding lends to its unique therapeutic approach found in the Eightfold Path, that is, the perceptual, cognitive, interpersonal, behavioral, societal, emotional, metacognitive, and biological rehabilitation of the self. This all allows for the possibility to not only be free from suffering, but to also maximize a person's potential. There are several ways that psychology both complies with the ideas of this framework, as well as benefits from it. While Buddhism is considered to be a religion, it does not require faith in the supernatural in order to practice its key teachings. That in itself makes the transition into a secular society much easier. The notion of impermanence also fits well into the scientific worldview, and our understanding of living things existing on a continuum, rather than in discrete separate categories. Barash 2014. Additionally, the Buddhist framework lends psychology a way to facilitate compassion. Understanding that the self is empty helps break down barriers between oneself and others, and the rest of the world. Ultimately, letting go of those egocentric habits allows for love and compassion to flourish. Varela 1999. There are, however, limitations to this theory of self, and of suffering. The Four Noble Truths are based on revealed knowledge, rather than the scientific method. It does not have the same ability to be continuously updated by new information. This will have consequences on their understanding of suffering, and an individual's role in it. While Buddhism claims that a person is a process of change, it is unclear how much of that change is under the person's control, and how much they can reroute for the purpose of therapy. The framework does not address other barriers that may exist between a person and the alleviation of their suffering. Like Buddhism, psychology lends some fluidity to the self, but there are some significant ideological differences. Psychology identifies both environmental and hereditary forces that create a portfolio of predispositions, temperament, neurotic tendencies, underlying mental disorders, etc. of a person. Whether they are adaptive or maladaptive, many of these traits are resistant to change and remain relatively stable over the course of a lifetime. 2012, they become the basis of personality. While in Buddhism this personality is said to arise from the five aggregates, psychology offers a different story. Within psychology, there are several functional levels to a person, including their outward behavior, cognition, and most fundamentally their brain. 2012. While each level seen is important, it is the physiological level that psychology, and the West as a whole, gives the most attention. While there is no working theory as to what consciousness, and thereby the self is, it is theorized to be a phenomenon of the brain. Bars, Banks and Newman, 2003. And so however the brain is originally configured, through genetic factors, and whatever physiological changes that occur in the brain, from environmental factors, its structural functional organization should shape a person's cognition, and in turn their behavior. There are some clear examples of this, one of the best being the link between early childhood trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder. Childhood is a particularly critical point in development, as it determines the organizational and functional status of the matured brain. Perry Pollard, Blackley Baker, and Vigilante, 1995. Being in a constant state of hyperarousal or dissociation from trauma allows maladaptive neuropsychiatric states to form. When these states persist, they create functional changes in the brain regions involved, and become maladaptive traits of the person. Perry Pollard, Blackley Baker, and Vigilante, 1995. The child's inner world becomes shaped by the fear they experienced, and leads them to hypersensitivity and reactivity to the world around them. Everyday stressors that may not normally elicit a response may now elicit exaggerated responses. They will quickly move from mildly anxious to feeling threatened, to feeling terrorized. Perry Pollard, Blackley Baker, and Vigilante, 1995. The end result of these cognitive and behavioral problems is the development of PTSD. This, if nothing else, is evidence for a physiological substrate for suffering. It is seen in other prevalent disorders like MDD, major depressive disorder, which is theorized to be related to a depletion of neurotransmitters in the brain. Krishnan and Nessler, 2008. While both Buddhism and psychology provide treatments options in the form of behavioral and cognitive interventions, only the latter has a unique treatment from its understanding of the brain. Thus, in addition to providing psychotherapy, a psychiatrist may prescribe their patient medication that addresses issues related to an underlying neural mechanism. In the case of a depression, it would be an antidepressant to rebalance their missing neurotransmitters. Krishnan and Nessler, 2008. There is an additional therapeutic ramification of psychology's understanding of the self. Often the most prevalent disorders like MDD and PTSD are difficult to treat in one go, with many becoming resistant to treatment. Dunlop, K. Youngner and Rothbaum, 2014. There may be multiple barriers to the success of therapy, including socioeconomic and cultural factors, and even co-occurring disorders. Burke, Starachi, Black and Avina, 2018. An understanding of a person's limitations to change themselves is extremely important for determining the scope of any therapy, as it is not possible for every person to be fully cured of their innate tendencies. Shoneen, Gordon and Griffiths, 2014. Because of this, Western psychiatry switches its focus from cures to helping manage symptoms and finding ways to adjust to one's problems. Unlike Buddhism, which argues that a person can fully transcend their suffering, psychology remains realistic about its expectations. The more methodological approach to studying the self is afforded by the field's reliance on the scientific method. Through experiments and trials, it seeks to find objective reasons for subjective phenomena, often breaking apart and reducing them to its smaller constituents. Wallace, 2003. Yet the same reductive tendency emits insight into the very thing they are trying to understand. Studying individual brain processes isolates them from the global context they occur in. Wallace, 2003. Whether it be the interactions between cells and molecules or groups of neurons, they do not reveal objective evidence for the existence of consciousness or subjective experience. Wallace, 2003. This narrow-mindedness obstructs an understanding of the mind-body relationship and shrouds the nature of the self in mystery. Psychology's reductionist view has further implications on its therapeutic process. Similar to a medical diagnosis, patients are labeled under discrete mental disorders, with particular protocols for treatment. Burke, Starachi, Black and Avina, 2018. This move towards clinical efficiency leads to two consequences. For one, pharmaceuticals become the main method of treatment, and risk becoming overprescribed. Harris, 2011. The second is that the treatment protocols address a limited number of issues. Burke, Starachi, Black and Avina, 2018. As stated earlier, there can be multiple barriers to successful treatment, and these oversimplistic protocols do not address the complexity of the problem. Burke, Starachi, Black and Avina, 2018. Indeed, part of the reason psychology is interested in Buddhist practices is to better address these factors through more holistic therapy, like in MBCT and DBT. It is evident by now that the different theories of self shape the way Buddhism and psychology address suffering. The former helps a dynamic and fluid individual achieve their potential, while the latter works within the limitations afforded by the person's life history. The result of their collaboration would be a therapy that emphasizes flourishing as much as it does the alleviation of suffering. The therapy will retain its transcendental core by using the Four Noble Truths its base. This skeletal structure will be constrained according to the patient's unique circumstances. Factors such as socioeconomic status, cultural background, sexuality, negative experiences, etc. will act as scaffolding that determine the scope of therapy's success. Working alongside the therapist, the patient will create a roadmap for short-term and long-term goals. Following this, a comprehensive and interdependent body of treatments will be delivered, modeled off of the Eightfold Path. Medical interventions will be key to help those with clear blocks towards the success of cognitive behavioral interventions. This therapy assumes that suffering ultimately stems from misunderstandings of impermanence, emptiness, and lack of inherent happiness, thus treatment will help internalize those ideas. With the organs of rehabilitation in place, the final piece would be an overarching ethical imperative. As much as science and psychology may claim to be objective and aethical, they still abide by a set of rules and standards for the treatment of sentient beings. This therapy would be an extension of that, seeking to maximize a person's compassion for themselves and others through loving-kindness meditation. Thus the patient not only learns to scale down to their inner cosmos, they can scale up with their sense of identity to the rest of the world. It must be understood that this therapy is as much a guide to life as it is a way to cope with distress. Both patient and therapist must be familiarized with its hybrid principles. Patients must have faith in their ability to self-actualize, as they acquire a holistic understanding of themselves. Therapists in turn need to know when to focus on guidance, and when to switch to treatment. Unlike traditional therapy, which may end once the patient reaches an appropriate level of functioning, this will continuously aid in personal growth throughout their life. Ultimately, the fruits of the collaboration between Buddhism and psychology will lead to a more comprehensive understanding of ourselves and suffering, one that is neither overly simplistic nor too idealistic. It would change the trajectory of therapy and broadens what it is meant to do. There remains many obstacles in the way of a full integration, if such a thing is possible. Further research is needed to determine the standard of training required for therapists, and how to ensure that the patient remains engaged in the program. By nature, this therapy poses more logistical problems than traditional ones, and asks more of the therapist and patient. Yet in the face of a complex problem, a complex answer is required. Sabrina Sharman Nodi. Sabrina Sharman Nodi is an oil and gas industry professional, currently working for a Fortune 500 global energy company. She is also pursuing a master's degree in human resources from Texas A&M University, and received her bachelor's degree in communication and anthropology from Carleton University, Canada. The only daughter of Lutfor Rahman Riton and Charlie Rahman, is passionate about pop culture, gender equality and animal welfare. She currently resides in Houston, Texas, USA with her husband David Biswas and their cat son Kit Kat Biswas. Fat Girl Rant. People hate fat girls. Actually, people hate fat girls. They want them around, but they don't want them around. They want fat girls to be their reliable friends, friends of tough times who would be ready to serve 24/7, the ones who would be funny and make them smile but not so funny that would overshadow them. The ones that would be kind of popular but not so popular, that it'd put their popularity at risk. Fat girls make them uncomfortable. You know what makes them more uncomfortable? When reliable funny fat girls lose a little bit of weight. Lately I discovered I'm more unlikable than I used to be, because I'm a little less fat for now. Because my double chin kind of blended in? Because I no longer fit in a 2X shirt. I have always been the fattest girl in the room. School, college, social events, family gatherings, you name it. On my good days I can still stand out and rise above despite people's relentless measures to subdue my existence. And that causes people to lose their collective minds. Because in our world fat people, darker-skinned people, short people etc. are expected to keep a low profile, because they're considered flawed. People expect them to be in a corner, away from the spotlight, trying to please others who are nothing but mean to them. Story time. When I was 9, I was still in Bangladesh. I was a student at Bangladesh Shishu Academy, and was participating in all sorts of shows with other kids throughout the year, without any fat hesitation. Acting, singing, writing, recitals were part of my daily routine. My parents made sure I was culturally involved, and quite frankly, I was pretty good. It bothered people. It bothered people that a fat kid was confident enough to get on a stage and not give a damn. At 9 I had a classmate's mom come up to my mom and share her concerns over her fat daughter, who was still wearing clothes of a 7-year-old, and I was wearing clothes made for teenagers. Even at 9 I knew it was her way of trying to shame my mom by implying her underweight daughter was fat, so my mom, the lady with an actual fat daughter, will feel like crap. It wasn't the first time, and it certainly wasn't the last. One time I got kicked out of a ride at an amusement park in Dhaka because I was too heavy. You should have seen the smiles on their faces. I had never seen these friends of mine this happy. This type of friends of mine still exist. Years went by and I sort of learned how to navigate my way through their pathetic nonsense. I gave up on a lot of things in life that I loved and enjoyed. Music, acting, even writing, because eventually I couldn't deal with the culpability of being good at things despite being fat. It felt abnormal. Ultimately the moms moved on to doing shittier things, and trained their daughters to do their dirty work. At times girls my age or older, seemingly underweight but otherwise uninteresting and unattractive, come up to me and cry about how they need to lose weight. Supposedly they were oh so fat and sad about it. I'd make the mistake of going shopping with them, and have them use my shoulder to fake cry on for fitting into a small instead of an extra small. They'd grab me a medium shirt to try on, calling it huge, already knowing that obviously a medium wasn't going to fit someone who wears a 2X. In fact, they knew those stores didn't even carry my size, but it was a great way to embarrass me. I saw the glimmer in their eyes, the kind of glimmer that says I'm here to make you feel bad about yourself, actual fat girl. Their nasally fake cry that says, I'm here to play mind games with you, to mess with your head. Girls I played with, girls learned music with, girls I recited poems with, girls I went to school with, girls I worked with, girls I socialized with, girls I actually cared for, they were all the same. It continued to happen during my teen years, my 20s, and now as I jump into my 30s as a grown-ass woman, it hasn't stopped. Years went by but the glimmers in their eyes, the nasally fake cries remained the same. I had figured by then it was their way of making me say nah. Are you crazy? You're so skinny. I'm the fat one. You look so beautiful but not me. And I did. I told them what they wanted to hear. I felt what they wanted to make me feel worthless. Not once did it occur to me that maybe it's jealousy, not once did it occur to me that it might be because they were intimidated by me. Because their posse had successfully made me believe since I buy plus-size clothes, I shop at Torrid and Lane Bryant, I wear extra-wide shoes, I'm definitely not on the same level as them. But now I see what the actual issue was. No one wants fat girls under the spotlight unless it involves humiliation. As a feminist, it always bothers me that the people who have been most unkind and mean to me in my life are women. Over the last 25 plus years, people have gone out of their way to let me know how fat I am, as if I'm not aware. In every path that I have walked into in life, there have been people who have made me feel either they like me because of my personality, or they made me feel like they only enjoy my presence because it made them look and feel good about themselves. Because standing beside the fattest girl in the room might make the ugliest person look somewhat average. I know it sounds horrible, but it's a fact. This is planet Earth, things here are complex, people are cunningly stupid, social calculations are part of daily lives, and every damn thing is a competition. Most normal-sized people have a hard time accepting that fat girls can have a happy life and a successful career. I mean, how dare they? I don't know why, but in the past, I have found myself trying to justify their offensive and impolite and uncouth attitude. Like I took it upon myself to protect their fragile and shallow ego? Made my biggest achievements look tiny, made my happiest moments look like they're no big deal, just to keep them perfect-sized people off my back. I had taught myself how to not take a compliment, and rather refuse to accept it, because if I did accept a compliment, they might think I'm full of myself, and how dare a fat girl be full of herself, right? I was already fat, I didn't want to become a bigger target. It might be hard for some to relate because they are not me, and have not walked in my fat girl shoes. No one has ever picked on them because of their weight, so they don't know how audacious it is. Lately it appears that I'm no longer likable to some people who in the past seemed to enjoy my presence. I kept wondering, what could it be? What changed? Is it the way I talk? Is it my manners? Is it the way I dress? Is it because I joke around? And then it dawned on me after a long conversation with someone very close to me, none of that had changed except for one thing. Though still very much obese, I lost some weight. And this has caused a chaos to the point where some people are having a hard time accepting that I'm no longer that morbidly obese girl who makes them feel skinnier than they actually are. I have other fat girlfriends, that's right, there's more of us out there, surprise, who had warned me that this would happen, but being my silly self, obviously I brushed it off. I thought there's no way people are this twisted and shallow, I mean, come on. But now I see it. I feel the disappointments and frustration. Truth be told, my weight actually never bothered me. My weight always bothered others. And perhaps on random days the fact that it bothered them bothered me. I had lost weight in the past, and I had gained it back in the past as well. But this time it feels like I committed some kind of crime, like I have made it rain on someone's parade. A part of me wants to say to them, there's no need to feel so salty about it. There's no need to roll your eyes at me. No need to whisper with your buddies in a way that I know you're obviously talking about me. There's no need to make me feel isolated. There's no need to try to portray me in a negative way among your crew, because you cannot use me as a fat girl prop right now. And if you must, maybe do it privately when I'm not around? I know it can be hard, but maybe practice a little bit of decency? Then I realize their attitude towards me may change based on my size. But my attitude towards them will remain the same whether I lose 100 pounds or gain another 100. I have come to realize I was bigger than them when I was 50 pounds heavier. I am bigger than them now, 50 pounds lighter. They will always be puny and small, and I will always be bigger than them, pun intended. Their insecurities aren't mine to keep up with. If anyone's goal is to make me feel isolated, then why should my goal be to make them feel included? I wasn't brought into this world by my badass parents to boost others' confidence, by making me feel bad about myself. It is not my job to make anyone feel like they are one of a kind by putting myself down. It would be unfair to blatantly put everyone in the same category though, because not everyone is this messed up. Some of my guy friends, some of my girl friends who are like my sisters have been extremely supportive and kind to me. I have an amazing guy, and a tiny but tight circle of close friends who genuinely look out for me. They ask how I am feeling. They make time to check on my health. They make me feel included and involved. They make me feel like I'm one of them. They make me feel like I belong. They worry. They encourage. They back me up. They offer help. They tell me that they're here for me. And I like that their treatment of me doesn't depend on the weighing scale. They treated me with respect before, they treat me with respect now, and I know they will continue to treat me with respect, no matter whether I blow up like a balloon or have an eating disorder. I am thankful to them for being decent frigging human beings. Hugs and kisses for everyone who may or may not be okay with me. Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Viktor E. Frankl.